Hello and welcome to another office hours. I'm Marcia Villalba, and today we are talking about serverless and containers. So that are the topics that we are going to cover today. I will be answering as many serverless questions as I can. And on my side, in the other side, we have Henrik Wellman, and he's a technical account manager for AWS, and he's your containers man. So how are you doing, Henrik?
I'm doing great, Marcia. Thanks for having me here.
Yes, this is really good. Serverless containers fight. We should run.
Yeah, exactly. The age-old showdown of containers and serverless. Awesome.
Exactly. So, yeah, the first thing I want to mention that if you're not aware, there is a getting started series going on now where Henrik is speaking. I always say to the other side, that side. Henrik is speaking and he's doing a talk about serverless and containers. Can you tell a little bit more about that talk?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we're doing getting started on AWS and comparing when to use serverless and when to use containers for applications. And we're going to do it real high level, so it's mostly for you guys who haven't done as much containers and serverless on AWS yet. But we're going to go through the basics and how you develop an application and push it to either a serverless application or as a container, and when to use what.
And what kind of container platform are you using?
So we're going to talk about both EKS, Elastic Container Service for Kubernetes, and ECS, Elastic Container Service for Amazon. So
Nice.
we're going to discuss both options there and Fargate, and when it makes sense to use what.
That's really interesting. So the link is in the screen. You can take now a screenshot and get the link. I will paste it in the chat so everybody can get access to it in an easy way. If you don't, there it goes. And then also we have a couple more events going on. There is the Dev Day. And if you're an advanced AWS user, I recommend you to check that out. It's on the 15th of October. And there will be around 15 sessions divided in 3 tracks. We have topics for IT architects, application developers, and then I think for DevOps and administrators. So this is going to be a very interesting event. It's a full day online event for free. Talks are free for 100 levels, so definitely I recommend you to check them out. I will be talking there about CI/CD for serverless applications, so that's the place to go. And finally, we have one more event that is going on right now. So this is, I think, the last day. Basically, you can enroll without missing anything. That is the Data Modernization Week. And there, if you're migrating to AWS or you're migrating to some more modern applications, maybe you're interested in checking that out. There is many different webinars happening as well. So I recommend you to check those out. I will put the links in the chats in a second. But yeah, so that's all my news. Why you don't tell me a little bit what has been going on the container space lately?
Yeah, sure. So we've had quite a busy fall here, I would say, in AWS. We've released quite a lot of new features for both ECS and EKS. So we had the Container Day in Europe here in combination with KubeCon recently. Recently, it was in August, but we released a lot of interesting features there. So one thing that we introduced or revealed during this Container Day was the AWS controllers for EKS. Super exciting new feature that we have been working on for a while now as an open source project. So basically what this enables you to do when you're running a Kubernetes cluster, you're able to introduce AWS services into your Kubernetes cluster. So let's say, for example, Amazon S3 for storage. Instead of using the external API when accessing Amazon S3, you can have a normalized way of accessing it within the Kubernetes cluster. So it's introduced as an operator within the cluster, and you can configure and handle all the credentials in your cluster and accessing the service with this operator. So I think you pasted the link here to the
Yes, I put it in the chat so everybody can see it.
Yeah.
Because I think it's good that everybody has access to all this if they want to check all the launches, because there were quite many.
Quite many. It was an exciting event. Unfortunately, it kind of flew a bit under the radar due to the situation we have in the world right now. So, I mean, everyone is getting a bit of a webinar fatigue. So
I know.
It's hard to keep up with everything. But a lot of interesting releases there in the container space. So, yeah,
that's
really cool.
Really nice to see. And I know very little about containers, so it's hard for me to ask you questions about all these events.
No worries.
But we have one question, and it's in Spanish. So I will try to translate it so we can all know what Sergio is asking. It comes in many parts. So let's go for the first part. So he says that he has a repository in code commit with using CloudFormation templates, and he has there his security groups, Aurora database, rows, buckets, stream of Kinesis, SNS, everything, Lambda layers. And then he says that the source is zips of the Lambda functions and the layers, all made in Python. And then he says that he does the deployments using AWS CLI, but he wants to automate it. So how he should automate it in an easy way without really have to split all the project in different ways or complicating his life. He says that one of the major problems he has, if he changed the name of the zips, CloudFormation doesn't realize that there is a change, and then the templates don't deploy. And well, I think that's a very common situation, he says. So if there is any suggestion, he will be very happy.
Yeah, okay. So that's an interesting situation. So it seems like he's doing most of the things by the book here. He's handling
I think so.
Yeah, running infrastructure as code, handling the CloudFormation templates within the code commit repository. And how to keep up with that? I'm not sure, actually.
I know. I have an answer for that. Go to my dev TOEIC on serverless, CI/CD. No, but I think you're doing everything right. So the next step, I think, is to create a code pipeline and to hook it to your code commit. Whenever you do a new commit in that repository, you can start the deployment. So when you create a code pipeline, you can create multiple phases. And code pipeline is a tool that will let you automate the deployment. And there you can create different stages. For example, one that is the source stage that will be getting the code from code commit in this case. And then next one will be the build phase, where you will be doing the same thing you are doing with AWS CLI. You can run it from code build. Code build is basically a Docker instance image that is empty, that you can run the same commands that you run in your computer. So if you are deploying with AWS CLI, don't deploy, just build the cloud package, the CloudFormation package. And the next step you can do is use the tools that are inside code pipeline to deploy those CloudFormations. After you have built them and create a little package, then you can deploy them using the code pipeline. So you have done the hardest part. The easiest part is to build the pipeline. So I will really recommend you to check that talk on the 15th. It will be available afterwards as well, because I think it will really help you to automate all the amazing work that you have done. And that will not change any names, and it should work as over the existing CloudFormation templates that you have, because you are just not changing the way that you're deploying. When you are creating the code builds, just put the same names. Everything you're running from your command line should be fine. I think
it sounds like a great answer.
Yeah. I love CI/CD. It's one of my favorite things in the world. So I will not let anybody deploy manually if I can.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, it's like infrastructure as code, CI/CD all the way.
Yes, agreed.
Yeah, it's the only way. I don't know when was the last time I used the AWS console to create a Lambda function, for example. I don't know how to do it. I create 20 million every day, but I don't remember how to go to the console.
No.
Yeah, while we wait for other questions, he's saying thank you for the answer. While we wait for other questions, I want to talk about one of your favorite topics you mentioned, that is Kubernetes security, EKS security best practices. And I don't know nothing about Kubernetes, but I love security, so...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, security is job zero, so that's great that you have that that view, Marcia. Yeah, so I mean, we have frequently gotten questions from customers on how to secure their EKS deployments. It's a really common topic when I discuss with customers how to make sure their EKS deployments are secure. And it might be to be able to meet regulations like in the US, HIPPA regulations, or whatever there might be in their specific business. So it's a really interesting topic. So recently we've written a kind of or started with a project that we call the AWS EKS best practices. So I think you have a link there we can share with the audience as well. So it's a really in-depth, let's say, project where we're looking into some of the most common topics when discussing security on EKS. We're starting out with the general identity and access management, for example, and how you secure the credentials to your cluster, how you make it the access secure to your cluster. We're talking about the using the endpoint publicly or private within the VPC as well, which is also something that we have gotten a lot of questions on, because by default we expose the endpoint publicly to the internet, and that's something that makes many organizations go like, "Oh, that's scary."
Yeah,
it's secure by default,
scary.
Of course. Yeah, it's secure by the AWS authentication, of course, so there's no problems there. But here we discuss a bit about the options and alternatives in depth more. Also, we're discussing on how you can secure your nodes in the EKS cluster in a good way, so make them hardened, and how you can run a custom AMI, for example, so you don't have as many attack surfaces exposed to your EKS cluster. So that's it's a great read. It might be a bit lengthy, but security is always a priority. So
yeah, definitely. And I think if you're running any kind of application that is production, you should check all the different security aspects of your application. If you're doing EC2s, containers, serverless, it doesn't matter what you're doing. Just go and try to figure out if you have any attack surfaces there, because the cloud takes care of a lot of things for you, but you have to understand the shared responsibility model, where the cloud is covering for you and where is your responsibility to protect your application. So that's something I think it's important to understand. You might not need to secure your data centers anymore, but you still need to secure your applications. And if you are going in the containers where you still have servers that are accessible to you, so you might need to secure those as well. So
exactly, yeah,
definitely.
Exactly. This is not. I mean, with serverless, you would be more. Don't have to worry as much about
It's a
these
different, I
things.
think it's a
Yeah.
different proposition, because when you have serverless, sure, you have less things that you have to worry about. You only worry about your application. You don't have access to the servers, but you still need to make sure that you're giving that's one of my favorite things from Lambda, that you can get super fine grained permissions, and then you really make your Lambda secure, because at the end of the day, your Lambda is running on a server or on a container. And if
Yeah.
you give permissions to anything, then basically that if somebody hacks that Lambda function,
Yeah.
they can do whatever they want. So
Exactly. Exactly.
that's one of the most important things. And also then making sure that all your configuration is done properly. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges when it comes to serverless, because there is so many configuration points, because now you have
Yes.
multiple Lambda functions, you have multiple resources and managed services, that there is like a lot of place for misconfiguration, and having a lot of so
Agreed.
security.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it's but making the parallel here to containers, I mean, so in addition to needing to worry about or looking into the aspects of your code, you would also need to look into the infrastructure within the
Yeah,
Kubernetes cluster, for example, if you're running EKS. And I mean, EKS is hard. It's not
I know.
trivial to run to run that and operate that. That's why we
Yeah.
always recommend Fargate as a good option, where you don't need to worry as much about
Yeah. Can you
running
tell a little
massive.
bit what is Fargate, what is EKS, what is ECS, so the people that are watching and might not be familiar with those services can learn
Sure,
a little
sure,
bit?
yes. That's a great point to start with. Yeah, so at AWS we have many options for running containers. We have the schedulers, as we call them, for running a container. So basically, everybody should know basically what a Docker container is. Maybe I'm assuming things here, but let's pretend that we know what a Docker container is.
That's a
So you need,
typical container. When you imagine
yeah,
a container, that's the container.
exactly, exactly. So you first of all, we need to store the container somewhere, and we provide something called the Elastic Container Registry at AWS, ECR. So this is where when you build a container on your local development environment or in your pipeline, preferably your development pipeline, CI/CD pipeline, you can push that container to ECR, for example. That's our service that we provide to store containers, Elastic Container Registry.
Because
And
there
then
is the Docker registry as well.
yeah, the Docker registry, that's the public, so to speak. You can have private as well, but it's
Okay.
a public option, but it's the most well-known option, I would say. But you have the same commands available in our registry, so you just
Yeah,
push the
and it's
container
inside
there.
your AWS account, so you don't need to go out and in and must secure.
Exactly, exactly. So we provide some security per default there. Of course, you need to make sure everything is secure in your application, but we provide a secure place to store the containers in ECR, and it's accessible within your VPC as well. Then, so when you have a container, it's stored somewhere. Then we provide some options to run the containers. So we have basically two schedulers. We have ECS, Elastic Container Service. That's our own, let's say, custom container scheduler that we provide. That's very flexible and lightweight, easy to configure. So there you create, yeah, it's an awesome tool, I think, if you're just getting started. There you can just build a task within ECS, and you configure a ECS cluster, and then you build a task in the cluster, and you basically push start, and it will start your ECS your task within the cluster, and configure load balancers, security groups, ingress to the application. And depending on your application stack, it might be a perfect fit. So yeah, and then we have EKS, Elastic Container Services for Kubernetes. That's also a scheduler that's available. That's based on upstream Kubernetes. So we track the Kubernetes open source project when we run this. We are basically 100 days after the Kubernetes release, just to maintain security and stability
Yeah,
and
sure.
compatibility with other AWS services. So that's the more kind of advanced flavor that you can run containers in AWS. And there are pros and cons of that, of course. You have the more flexibility with integration with other cloud native projects like logging projects. There are a lot of third-party loggers available, for example, out there. Many of them are customized maybe for Kubernetes. You have the popular Prometheus and Grafana for tracking the metrics of your pods, as these containers is called in the cluster. So basically, these tools are available to integrate with EKS as any other standard Kubernetes installation. So we don't have any special caveats of running EKS. It's Kubernetes. But we manage the control plane of the Kubernetes cluster.
Yeah, you don't need to install the Kubernetes. It's a service. You go and you use it as you will be using it if you already install it, but you avoid that part. You don't need to maintain it or install it.
Yeah, that's the great thing about that. You don't need to worry about maintaining the control plane or installing those things.
I had my first view of Kubernetes last week when I ran this series of interviews in my YouTube channel where I invite experts to talk about things, and I had Massimo Referre. He's developer advocate for containers, and I asked him to come to the show to talk about Kubernetes because I never saw it before, and I'm very lazy. So instead of learning it by myself, I invite them over. I record a video and I learn.
That's smart. That's really smart.
That's my show. So tomorrow the video is coming out and I learned what is the difference between Docker and Kubernetes. I thought they were the same thing until like last week. Now I learned one is an orchestrator and the other one is like a service to put containers, and what is the Docker way is Docker Swarm. So that interview is going to be very good if you are really starting with containers. We talked like for an hour and a half and he really explained how to run Kubernetes on AWS. Like we ran a cluster and it was super good.
Perfect. That sounds like a great place to start if you want to know more about EKS.
I learned so much, I have to say, because I knew nothing. And then we have Fargate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we have those are the orchestrators. Then we have the type of how you want to run your container. So we provide AWS Fargate for both EKS and ECS. So what we do there is that we manage running the actual nodes for you. So you just schedule a container as a task in ECS or as a deployment within EKS, and you just push that to the cluster, ECS or EKS, and you configure how many CPUs, virtual CPUs, and how much memory do you want this task to have. And then you just tell go fix, and Fargate will take care of it for you. So you can basically run an ECS cluster only on Fargate. You can run a EKS cluster only on Fargate and be able to remove all the heavy lifting of managing nodes within the cluster. So we talk about Fargate as a serverless concept as well.
I think using the AWS definition of serverless, that it needs a serverless component needs to be like you pay for how much you use. In Fargate, that's the case. Then you don't have to manage any infrastructure. When you're using Fargate, you don't see the EC2 machines at all. They are inside the AWS pool of EC2s.
Yeah.
Then there is it scales automatically. Fargate will manage the scalability for you.
Exactly.
And then you have the high availability built in. Fargate is a regional service. You don't need to say in which availability zones you want it. It's just deploy in 2, 3, as many as you want. So it adheres to the AWS definition of serverless. Then if you have a different one, that is different.
I'll take that one. That sounds good.
Yeah. We have a question now, and I think this one is for you. Well, we have a couple of questions now, but they have been building up. So maybe we can start with the first one from Harshit. I hope I didn't destroy your name. It says, I have configured API gateway with Lambda function. The first instance of Lambda starts when it gets the first API call. Is the same in the case of Fargate plus ECS?
So, okay, that's a great question. So, I mean, this is one of the differences that we are going to discuss in the talk of serverless versus containers.
Yeah, but, and I asked this question to Massimo exactly because I was like, does this work? How it works?
Let's see if we manage to give the same answer then. But yeah, so in the case of Fargate with ECS, your application code would probably already be running. So it would be available to serve that request with the kind of the backdraw that you're paying for running that container. Then it will be always on, basically. Yeah. So for this is something that we discuss in the talk as well, that for spiky loads that are like non-existent to small not that many requests, might actually be a better suit for Lambda only, because Lambda, as we all know, scales indefinitely, almost at least, and it starts when you serve that request. But ECS has a container basically already running to serve that request. Then it might scale very high because you have scaling built into ECS and Fargate as well. So, I mean, you can run basically just one container to serve that request, and then it can scale out to a massive amount of containers.
And I think I think it does make sense. One thing I think that is very important on the difference with Fargate or containers and Lambda is the programmatic model. When you are working with Lambda, you are building an event-driven application. So the ways that Lambda works, it's very event-driven, while when you're working with containers or virtual machines, you're building a traditional application that is always up, is always listening, and it's like a service that is taking requests. So it works that's kind of one of the main difference between serverless and containers, the way that you think about the solution. And Ricky says, hello there. Hello.
Hey.
Yes. So we have another question. I think this one is an easy one. What is a technical account manager? We didn't say what it was.
Yeah, sorry, we skipped that part. Yeah, so I'm a technical account manager, or TAM. So we as TAMs work more with the customers on the operational side of things. So we are available to customers that are on the enterprise support plan, and we try to take care of their operational issues or if they have any questions regarding how to secure a service for operational excellence. Like common questions that we work with our customers that might have container issues, running large-scale containers in a mixed organization, and how we can support them with AWS services in the best way. So, yeah, basically we're the go-to guys for our customers.
So this type of session for you is normal work, just answering random questions from customers.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of how my day looks. So yeah,
good. It's really, you should come really more often then.
Yeah, it's awesome to be able to see all these interesting implementations and awesome setups out there. So it's good fun.
Yeah. Harshit says that, yes, thank you for the answer. And then we have another question from Cardinal that asks when not to use Fargate.
I would use Fargate all the time if I could. I mean,
No. When not to use it?
not to use it. Okay, that's harder. That's a hard question. Yeah, so I mean, Fargate is. I mean, yes. If you, for example, if you need to access some of the low-level constructs of your EKS cluster or your ECS cluster, let's say, for example, you need a custom kernel in your worker nodes within the cluster. Now we're getting down to the really specifics here, but yeah. So if you need to tweak the kernel parameters in Linux for optimal performance, for example, that's something that you wouldn't be able to do in Fargate, because we manage that for you, and of course we configure it for great performance, but you might have some additional needs, like you need a special parameter. Then you would have to use divert from Fargate to using plain EC2 backed instances, as we call it.
Yeah, and I think that's in general the great answer for anything that is managed. The more managed you go in the spectrum, the less control you have on the infrastructure, but also the less cost of ownership. So when you're using Fargate or Lambda, then you don't need to manage that infrastructure. That might work for 80% of the cases, but maybe that small percentage where you really need like to tune your your Docker or your whatever operating system or things like that. And the same applies to Lambda. It works for almost all the use cases, but there is always a amount of use cases that you need to have either something very particular or such a performance that Lambda might not be giving you because they are using just general hardware, so you might not get the super compute optimized solution when you're running Lambda. And I imagine with Fargate, you don't choose the machine that is running, no? When you're using Fargate. Yeah, you just get basic computers. Exactly. So there is some use cases that you might need to go to a little bit more details, but that's not every time.
No, exactly. I would say that in my experience looking at customers, I would say that looking at the customers I work with, at least 80% of the workloads would be fine in Fargate. But it depends. It all boils down to your application and how that's architected. And I mean, that's the same for Lambda as well. So are you able to kind of have your code manage that? I mean, another thing that might make you look away from Fargate is if you have the tasks are currently restricted to 4 virtual CPUs and the amount of memory available to that instance type. So that could also be an issue if you have extremely large containers. But I mean, that's also something that you might need to have a look at your application if you have that issue. So but so I mean, start with Fargate, and if
no, start with Lambda.
Yeah, okay, sorry. Okay, start with Lambda, then Fargate. Okay.
Then you see. Then you can get to bare metal if you
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I think that's always the question on who you ask, what is the first answer? Because for me, if somebody asked me, where should you start? I was like, always Lambda. There is no other answer for that.
Yeah, but I would agree as well. If I could, I would run Lambda first or recommend Lambda.
But if you're migrating, I think containers are a great use case, because then you can basically lift and shift in most of the cases. Sure, it doesn't work like magic, but you have a little bit more simple way of migrating instead of destroying your whole application into small pieces and migrate to the cloud.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's go to another question. And somebody is telling that they have problems with the Lambda payload. So here it says that they are dealing with images or video and the payload is small. And one thing I would recommend you if you're using a big object is to use S3. Store the object there and then send to Lambda the URL. So I don't know what you're doing, but for example, if you have a web application and somebody is uploading an image, you can basically use the AWS SDK for S3 or amplify with S3. and upload that image there. And then you can create a trigger from that S3 bucket that whenever a new image is stored or modified or deleted, that it sends an event to Lambda. And that will send an event to Lambda with the URL of the image. And then you can take it again from the Lambda. And there you don't need to pass it in the event object where the payload is small. So that's kind of a way to go around and not send images in the payload of Lambdas, because they are not meant for that. You are basically need to pass URLs or links or something that, for example, from S3 or other storage. Or then if you have a more complex application, you can use EFS. I don't know what you're doing, so it's hard to answer. But if you are working with those images and you need to pass them, for example, from one Lambda to another, and you don't want to use S3, you can put them in EFS and connect all your Lambdas to that elastic file storage, and they will have access to that Lambda, and you don't need to share it. You just send the path. So there is many ways that you can basically avoid passing the image as a payload, because that's not the idea. That's why the payload is so small. You have something to add?
Yeah, I can just add that we recently launched the support for EFS on Fargate as well for containers. So that's an option there as well.
Was not there?
No, this was not available until I think it was in September here. We released.
Okay, so more or less the same time that they released the Lambda update.
Yeah. So, but yeah. Otherwise, your answer made great sense. So yeah.
Good. Yeah. So there is another question, and I think we touched a little bit of this before, but maybe we can go into some more clear answers on one, to choose one over the other. I let you start.
Yeah,
I'm a lady. I let you
start. So it seems like we're ending up in this Lambda versus containers battle once more. But yeah, let's go there. So yeah, so one of the things when to choose, one other thing when to choose containers is like if you have, perhaps you have the need for support of specialized hardware like GPU adapters for inference, machine learning inference training in your application, then containers would make sense, because you would be able to address those GPUs within your containers running these heavy workloads or batch jobs for the machine learning training jobs. That's one example. And also it might be that you have the need to run your tasks longer than 15 minutes, because we know we have the 15-minute the 15-minute limit on Lambda run times. But I mean, those would be, you could be able to work around those in Lambda if you're using async calls as well. There's
or step functions. I think one thing I learned recently is people mixing Lambdas and containers, because again, Lambdas and containers are two different ways of building applications. So for example, I learned this use case that somebody was embracing the Lambda paradigm of event-driven. So whenever they upload an image or something to S3, they were triggering a Lambda function, and then that Lambda function was calling the Fargate, because it's great, that capability of doing event-driven, but Fargate doesn't have that. So it's not one or the other. You can build and combine, and that's I think the idea of these services, that you have a lot of options than to choose from. But the important thing for me is that when you're choosing something, that you're conscious of why you're choosing something, because choosing any of these services, from virtual machines to containers to functions, they have trade-offs. So being very careful on why you choose something, and if you're okay with the trade-offs, I think that's the smart way to choose. I will say always try to go serverless first if you can, because the cost of ownership really decrease. And there's many studies now coming out on how teams perform, the speed of serverless teams versus teams that are not serverless, because of the main nature of serverless is just to try to focus on the value of delivering your applications and not managing all this infrastructure and all these Kubernetes or all these other things that maybe don't provide any value. So, but sometimes you need to go all that way because you are migrating or you have the knowledge in place. You have all these operations team that knows how to do containers. So it's not that one or the other. Or you have restrictions, as you said. So it's just hard.
Yeah, but I would agree that I wouldn't look at it like it's one or the other, because I mean, you can always throw in a Lambda here and there. There's like, you don't pay for it when it's not running, so
Exactly. And there is I think one of the biggest thing with serverless that is very easy to run a hello world, and that's maybe why everybody is like, let's go Lambda. But the mindset of the developers when you are going from on-premise to virtual machines to containers, the developer's brain stay the same. It's the same type of application development. But when you go to Lambda, it's a totally change in paradigms. You really need to train your developers in order to understand how to do this new type of design, these new event-driven applications, asynchronous code. So there is a lot of work involved in moving to serverless. Then if you have that same train, it will be faster than any other team you can imagine. But you need to invest that time in training the team. If not, in 2 months, you will be like, fuck, what I did this. But I think that's one of the reasons why I love serverless, and I will encourage everybody to learn it. But be very mindful on what are the trade-offs and what are the capabilities that you already have. Are you migrating? Are you starting from scratch? What you are building? What is your requirements? Do you need like super small latency? Can you live with a little bit latency in your request? What is that you need? So it's a hard answer.
It depends, maybe.
I have that banner ready. It depends.
Oh yeah.
That's my favorite answer to a lot of the
exactly.
questions.
Yeah.
Oh man, there is many questions that I have been ignoring. Let's see. So somebody's asking, Ricky, what do you think of services that attract a lot of the difficulties of serverless, like Vercel and Netlify? They both offer cloud functions, but I assume they are built on AWS. I don't know much about third parties functions. I think they all work more or less the same than Lambda. I have not used them. I cannot tell you. But abstracting things is always good. If you don't need to touch, like Henrik was saying 5 seconds ago, if you don't need the configuration, don't configure it. The more you touch, the more you break. So if you don't need to touch anything, just upload your code and take responsibility from that code. I'm totally happy with that. If that works for you. So the more abstraction, I think I'm a believer on that. So yeah, I don't know if you have something to add.
No, I agree totally with what you're saying. The more abstraction is better. But I mean, I'm not familiar with these frameworks for deploying.
I have not used them. I've been using Lambda functions for everything that I need to do on the function service. But Lambda abstracts a lot of things as well. So
yeah, exactly. The only thing I would be careful with is like what type of direction these products will take in the future, and so you don't build yourself into something that might be,
don't start a discussion. That's not a wise discussion to start online.
Sorry.
But yeah, but if somebody asks the questions, we can go there.
Let's wait and see then.
Yeah, let's see. But yeah, I think one of the important things when you're using any service is to understand what is their service agreement level. If you're using some third-party service, what they promise and are they delivering? Can they handle the load? Because if you put all your company onto something that you don't know, or it's cool when you do a hello world, but when you want to go bigger, that's something I leave the question on the table. I don't know the answer. Yeah. Somebody's asking, AWS has a managed WebSocket service. API Gateway has WebSocket support. So API Gateway provides REST endpoints and also WebSockets. So definitely, that's the managed WebSocket service. You still need to manage the connections. So whenever somebody connects to that WebSocket, because everything's stateless when you're working with serverless, you need to have somewhere the state. So then you can broadcast or reply to that customer, client, or whatever they're calling WebSockets. So yeah, I have a video on that. So if you're interested, I will leave you the link in the description box on that. Do you know some other WebSocket managed service?
I'm not very familiar with any alternative to API Gateway, unfortunately. So, but it seems like a good option, I think.
Yeah, there is. Then depending on what you're building, because if you're building GraphQL, then you can use AppSync. That comes also. It's a managed GraphQL service that comes with the subscription. That is the real-time thing, but that's not WebSockets pure and. Like as we know it, it's just more abstractions built on it.
Yeah.
So that's the answer. So they're talking to each other. That's good. So somebody already replied that API Gateway supports sockets. So good. Thank you for answering that. And there is a Fargate question for you.
Yeah.
I heard you can deploy Fargate using Docker Hub. What other options are there? With Docker Hub, images expires in 6 months.
Yeah, so Elastic Container Registry, ECR, on Amazon is a great place to deploy and store your container images. So preferably you should have a pipeline there where you develop your application, code build that pushes that application to Elastic Container Registry, and you would have it available there, and you are able to set tags on the images and life cycle them as you see fit. So that's I would say is a great option to Docker Hub.
And we talked about it like some time ago that we said that it was also more secure because it's inside your AWS account. So
Exactly, and you're able to set the you can use a IAM role to give the permission to the service account that accesses the images, so you're able to differentiate there. So, and we also have image scanning available since a year ago now. So it would be able to scan your container images for common vulnerabilities within the operating system. Yes. So would give you a little green checkbox telling you that you're good to go from a security perspective.
Yeah. I have a question for you because I don't use containers, as you might heard a million times that I say, but I heard about this really interesting service called Copilot.
Yeah, exactly.
That caught my eye because I don't know anything about containers, so it sounds lovely for beginners.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, I wouldn't call it a service per se, but it's a CLI actually that makes you able to create an application and configure everything around your application and life cycle manage the application as well. So it would create the necessary tasks within ECS. So it's for Elastic Container Service. Also runs on Fargate, if I'm not wrong with that. But yes, it's a great framework to manage and lifecycle manage your application and the entirety of your ECS application. Kind of like I would say like Amplify for serverless, but for containers.
So you have a Docker image in your computer, you use Copilot that will deploy it to AWS and put it in the registry and do all the hard work for you?
Basically, yes. I haven't been able to dive deep on it yet, but you would be assisted with many of these tasks. So
sounds lovely.
Yeah, that's
So
a
we
very
have,
nice tool.
I was reading
Abstracting
about
all
it.
the hard stuff, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm a serverless person. So for me, whatever I can minimize the infrastructure management and all these things, I'm the happiest person in the planet.
agreed. Agreed.
We have another question from, I will not even try, Rag. Wow, I will not try. What are your thoughts on the AWS database certification? It feels a bit of strange. Why is this kind of certification released? Do you have any certifications, Henrik?
Yeah, I have all the professional, all the
Wow.
start basic
Yeah,
certifications
the
and
associates.
networking speciality, but
Oh,
I've stayed away from database certification. So that was recently introduced, I think, or about
yeah, yeah.
now
Yeah, I
this
don't
year, I
know
think.
why it feels strange. AWS has like 6 different specialty
Yeah.
certifications. So it has the database one, it has the, I think, something with analytics. I don't know if it's called big data or something like that. Before, the analytics and the database work together, and then they split it in these two. And I think it makes sense because you can be a big data expert and know very little about databases,
Mm.
or about the 60 different flavors of AWS databases. Then there is the network specialist, then there is the security specialist, Alexa, and machine learning, if I'm not wrong. Those are the 6
Mm.
specialty
Yeah.
databases certifications. And I think they are great because if you are coming from a very specific background, then you can go and get certified in these very in-depth certifications that are very appreciated in the community and in the workforce. So it's a great way to prove that you know this area in depth. So I don't know what is weird or why is strange for you. Let us know. But I find it amazing that we have all these specific certifications. I'm waiting for the serverless one.
Yeah, exactly. I've been kind of wondering where's the serverless one. It's
Yeah, I think
where's it?
the developer associate is very serverlessy.
Yeah.
It's at least the latest kind of version is it's focused a lot of on
Yeah.
serverless components, managed services, Cognito, and Dynamo, and all these things. But I don't know. And what
Yeah.
certification you should do if you are doing containers? What is a good one?
Yeah, that's also something I've been waiting for. But as you mentioned, I think the solution architect professional is a great, well-rounded certification that kind
You need
of
to know everything.
yeah, basically. And you get I can remember that I had quite a few container questions there, so that was a good one. But yeah, I think we should introduce a container speciality as well
Ah,
upcoming. It's such a interesting field, I think so. Yeah,
it is. Then
yeah.
somebody's asking if I will choose SAM or serverless framework. Any of them, just choose one and use it. Don't use your console to deploy your Lambda functions. So I think both are great. I don't have anything to say which one is better, but just pick one. So let's see what other questions. Uh, I'm trying to understand this question. OPGO, for my organization, I want to pull users online and I want to provide them Windows environment in the cloud so they can connect anytime and from where. Is this good, like workspaces?
Yeah, sounds like
Yeah,
a
I
great
think,
fit for workspaces, and
yeah.
maybe the Active Directory, simple Active Directory service as well.
Do you have a
Simple
good definition for what is workspaces?
workspaces would be managed computers, client computers within the cloud, I would say, within your
Desktop
VPC.
as a service?
Desktop as a service. Yeah, that's great.
Because they are
That's a
not
great.
virtual machines. Well, they are virtual machines, but they have an operating system that you can go in and do things.
Exactly. And work on them and use the
Exactly.
common Microsoft tools on them. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's
I use it when my computer doesn't have enough power. So if I want
yeah.
to do some crazy live streaming or something, and I want to make sure that my computer will be working, I start a work service, I configure, I don't know, my OBS and all that there, and I use it like my source of information, because my computer can run out of power, can get out from the internet, can have so many million problems, but workspaces is very reliable.
Yes.
So that's what I would recommend, and I think, And what is the Active Directory? So I will put that link as well. This is called Amazon Active Directory.
Sorry, I think it's the Amazon Simple Directory service or something like that. I'm not.
That's very away from my usage, because I don't do much type of this.
So it's well, it would be basically to organize the users and have a common identity for them. So
there is your put it all the links in the chat, so OPYO, you can go and check it there. And we have 5 more minutes, so if you have any questions, it's the time to ask them. One thing I was amazed with the container space is that the whole roadmap is public. That's something very interesting.
That's great that you brought that up, Marcia. That's I mean, everything we do within the container space is announced on the public roadmap. So maybe we have the link available here as well.
Yeah, it's coming.
That's great. So, and I mean, as you know, and I'm sure you have told people before, is that we 95% of our roadmap is affected by customers' requests. So everyone,
and it happens everywhere in AWS, even if the roadmap is not public or is secret, like most of the services, then everything is based on your feedback. So if you have anything to complain or anything you need or whatever, you tell me, you tell Henrik, or any AWS employee. Will take your feedback very seriously, and we share it with the product teams in order to improve. So yes.
Absolutely, yes, and if you check the containers roadmap, you can say that there are many exciting things upcoming in this space as well. So, and I would be staying tuned for reInvent this year, especially if you're a container geek like me. So it would be a lot of cool announcements.
Yeah, reInvent is going to be crazy this year.
Yeah,
it's like 3 weeks of free online content. Oh man. I'm so excited. I cannot wait.
Yes.
Yeah. I will not be sleeping for 3 weeks. I already decided that, because I'm in Europe. reInvent is happening in the other side of the world. So so it's going to be, I will sleep like vampire style during the day. I tell my husband already, during those 3 weeks, don't count on me.
That sounds like a good plan.
I will be live streaming all day, every day. So
cool.
So it's part of the developer advocates role that we get to do all these cool things. So
that's I'm kind of jealous there. So interesting.
Well, there's always openings. By the way, if somebody's watching, we have an opening for Russian speaking, so you can ping me on Twitter if you are a Russian speaker and you want to join my team. We just opened that position, so I don't know if somebody from the Nordics wants to join the team, but I'm always happy to have colleagues here.
Cool.
Yeah. So let's see. Somebody is asking a question about S3. So when downloading a file from S3 using a signed URL, if the URL expires, an error page is displayed. Can you customize that error page? I don't know. I imagine you should be able to customize, because this is like Lego things. So maybe if you cannot customize the error page, but maybe you can do some kind of interface there. I'm not sure. So if I find the answer, I will try to put it in the chat in a second. But we are about to finish, so I want to wrap up a little bit this session before we complete. So so thank you very much, Henrik, for being here today. It was really fun. And I'm really excited that you're going to talk about serverless and containers in the upcoming event. And yeah, next Monday we'll be again here in these office hours answering all your questions. I don't know who you will join me, but somebody technical that can answer all the questions that I cannot answer. Remember to enroll to the Dev Day that is happening on the 15th of October. And this is going to be an amazing event coming up for re:Invent, 15 talks, level 3 400, really going in depth. We'll have Q&A with all the experts, so we will be answering all the questions that you have. So please go and check this event out. It's going to be really cool. And with that, I tell you, thank you very much for the time. And yeah, have a great week. Thank you, Henrik.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Great being here,
Bye.
Marcia.